everyone. Sean O'Connor here from Macabre Daily, and I have Corey Farrenkopf here with us. Corey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's wicked flat.
Of course. I mean, once I got my hand on Haunted Ecologies, I felt it was incredible. There's 15 stories in there that are delightfully creepy, dread-inducing, and incredibly well written. But in the state that the world is today, I was like, is this nonfiction? I'm not sure what's going on here.
Yeah, it's a dark one for right now.
I don't know if it's kismet, but you certainly have launched this collection at an appropriate time in reality. So I think that's helpful. I definitely think it's helpful. I think people should absolutely read this collection because of what's going on right now with climate change and just, the deconstruction of a lot of agencies that, that are beneficial to our relationship with nature. So anyway, I'm sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Let's get to this incredible book. All right. So we've got 15 short stories. There will be no spoilers because I want everyone to go out there and get the book and read it. But we're definitely going to talk about a couple of them. I want to know what the hell is in the basement, Corey. I want to know so badly. But let's start from the beginning. Okay. So let our listeners and our readers know, what was the inspiration for the collection?
That's a good question. It's a lot of stuff. I live on Cape Cod. My family's lived here for like ever. And it's kind of weird to be from here because it's like a little spit of sand that sticks off into the ocean. Slowly, or not so slowly, eroding forever. And like throughout my entire life, before I even knew what climate change was or had any concept of this, like being in middle school or like early high school and stuff, people would always be like, Cape Cod's only going to be around for another 50 years. Cape Cod, another 100 years, 150 years. So you always have had this kind of like doomsday clock in your brain growing up here if you're like listening to people. And so that gets into the stories a lot. In my day job, I'm a librarian and I do a lot of work for environmental education and sustainability education and stuff like that. I'm one of the organizing members of the Blue Marble Librarians, and we're a group that like organizes talks about this kind of stuff and whatever. So I've been like doing that work outside of my fiction also. So I like bring in different people to talk about like, where is the ocean going to be in 50 years as far as like how Cape Cod goes?
Yeah.
And they always show you these maps where it's like, here's your worst case scenario. And it'll be like, oh, that's the back parking lot of the library. And that's where the ocean will be. So stuff like that. I spent a lot of my childhood just like in the woods around my family's house. My buddies and I would just like wander. And because you're on Cape Cod's not super big. So like you can't really get lost in the woods. You'll walk like a mile or two and pop out on some road in the next town over and be like, all right, I got to walk this weird way home. But a lot of those woods, like my childhood woods where I spent all that time, like most of it's now like developments and stuff. And that's always a bummer. But I care about birds a lot. I care about trees. I care about like all the nature around me. And I spend a lot of time like bird watching and stuff. And the more books you read about it, the more like local experts that you talk about these things, the more you learn like, hey, things aren't great. And I think some of the only way I could get to not be like horrendously crushed by it all the time is to like pull the stories out of me and like put them into books or put them into like magazines or whatever. So yeah. I think a lot of that. Yeah.
You have this incredible ability. Actually, you know what? Let me not spoil it because it's my next question. Yeah. The blurb on the jacket is from Nathan Ballingrud. Mm-hmm. Your stories and his stories, especially from North American Lake Monsters, what a perfect marriage. They're, perfect read-alongs right there. Mm-hmm. As I was, making my way through your collection, it just kept, I was like, oh boy, and it's not that the stories are similar. You both have your own distinct voices, and they're great. But what you both do is that you have this uncanny ability to represent nature in its beauty, just like you were talking about,
Mhm.
but also that unknown quality of, I don't want to call it terror because I don't want to villainize nature, but it is that, that otherness that we're not familiar with. You both have this incredible ability to bring that to life where you still have the beauty of it, but you also have that fear, that trepidation of, I don't actually know what's going to happen here. I don't know what this encounter is ultimately going to produce. And I'm entering it one way. Am I going to leave it in the same way? Often not. And that's when these stories really land for the reader and they resonate. They're really impactful. So I just wanted to commend you right there. That's less of a question and more of a statement. But I did want to know, do you have a relationship with Nathan? Because these stories are they're great read-alongs.
I mean, like Nathan and I have been friends on the internet for a while. We did part of my job as a librarian. I like do programs. So one of my big things is I do like lots of horror programming because it's like what I'm interested in. And I always want to get people reading more genres, to get people reading different things. Because like as a librarian, you see people read like all of the same thing. It's like one lane that like the majority of readers are. And I'm like, look at all this cool stuff. There's so many books you can read. Like you could be getting into this like unusual, weird stuff and you might love it. Or you might be like, wow, that's strange. So a number of years ago, I don't know if it was during COVID or pre-COVID. It was probably during COVID because I went kind of crazy with programming and was doing like digital program on top of digital program. And Nathan was on this panel that I put together where it was people talking about the evolution of horror from Poe to like contemporary times. So he was on that and that was great. When I was first getting into reading kind of like weird between genre, spooky, dark, spec fic, or whatever we want to call it, I was living in Northampton. No, I was living in Florence. Yeah, it's like out in Western Mass. And his first collection was put up by Small Beer Press, and they were located the next town over. And so every once in a while, you'd go to like a literary convention out there, or like small things happening, and they would have like Kelly Link and Gavin Grant would have like a table and would be selling books. But also the library had like all their stuff. And this was back in the time where like, as a librarian who does acquisitions and stuff, like I read like most of the book reviews coming out. So I'm like never really surprised by a book coming out. So I know everything. I'm like, oh, this book, and you're not really like pleasantly surprised walking into a bookstore, finding something new. But back in the day, I found North American Lake Monsters at the Forbes Library, which is Northampton's library. And I was like, look at this cover, look at this title. This is great.
Right.
And so I read it and I was like, whoo, this is what I want. This is kind of one of the things I've been searching for, you know? And that kind of hit me at a pivotal point where I was originally writing kind of surreal literary fiction, I guess. Like just kind of, it was strange. I guess it would probably be called weird fiction, actually. I didn't have that vocabulary back then, so I didn't really know. But then I read his stuff and I was like, ooh, this guy's doing this thing. Like that can kind of like point me in the direction of where I want to go. And then I read some other people's stuff. Like I was reading Kelly Link at the time and Karen Russell and a lot of the like year's best fantasy and dark fantasy and horror that Kelly Link used to edit with, I think like Ellen Datlow or something. So all these things kind of meshed and like pointed me in that direction. But Wounds by Nathan Ballagard is probably like my favorite collection, top 3 collections. I don't want to put my favorite collections like in a war against each other. But I just love Nathan's writing. I love in North American Lake Monsters how it's just like everyday people dealing with supernatural things along with just like difficult things that are happening in their lives, whether it's like dealing with grief or just like the stress of being human. Because that's one thing that I've always been drawn to is like the lives of like everyday people. Like I don't usually write stories about like the millionaire who's going to go like battle the space monsters with all of his technology or things of that nature. So I've always really cared about like working people. And that's kind of my background. Like my dad was a firefighter. My mom's a bookkeeper for a construction company. Like all like everyone who's behind me is like kind of just like normal working class people and stuff. And I've also held a lot of very strange jobs. over the years before being a librarian. So I think so much of what I write is pulled from my life, the life of people around me, the life I see. And I think that's what Nathan does in a lot of his work. Not necessarily like the butcher's table. Like, I don't think Nathan's like hanging out on like a pirate ship trying to like enter hell, but like his other earlier stuff. Yeah. And also like, I mean, like his novel, The Strange is like one of my favorite books. His new one, The Trip to the Moon Spiders, is awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And I'm a person who really loves blending genres and loves when people are doing strange stuff with their work. And Nathan's always doing strange stuff with his work. And he cares so much about the language in his stories. And I care so much about the language in my stories. So I'm always drawn to writers who are doing that. And I'm always looking for that kind of thing. So if you know any other ones that I don't know, let me know.
I certainly will. And vice versa.
But that's a huge compliment. Like, Nathan's one of my favorite writers. And it means a lot to me to have you compare that. And thanks.
It honestly was almost immediate. It was almost immediate. First story in, I was just like, ooh. And then second story in, I'm like, okay, yep. All right. I'm definitely seeing some similarities here. Again, not mimicry. You guys both have your own distinct voices, but I loved being in the worlds that you created. Your characters do feel that they're lived in. You know, to your point, you know, you're not writing about, you know, the billionaire trying to do whatever. You know, you're writing about real people who are just trying to get through their day, honestly. You know, they're just trying to overcome whatever obstacle that they may have, whether it's, you know, finishing, you know, reading their father's poem that may end the world or may save it, you know. And again, no spoilers to this collection. I hope that I've intrigued people now. They're like, wait, what's that all about? I got to read this. Or finding out what is in the friggin' basement. But, you know, your characters they're just, you know, they're everyday people, and the reader can relate to that. Mm-hmm. So, again, you know, I try not to break my arm patting you on the back, but this collection, it's just incredibly well written, and your characters they come alive. Even though they're not fantastical, they do feel they're so real and they're so well written that what happens, and again, I have to watch myself because I don't want to give away any spoilers, but what happens when it does happen, their reactions to those things felt well earned and felt realistic, even in the most unrealistic of circumstances. I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. I hope I landed the plane. All right. So this brings me to my next question. There's cosmic undertones to this collection. I wanted to get a little bit of insight to your background with the cosmic and with folklore in general, because those two really are prevalent in the collection. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. What is your
It's all good.
Your background with that?
Yeah. I mean, I went to Catholic school for like 9 years. So I spent a lot of time thinking about religion and thinking about like giant deities in the sky that are always watching you and judging you and possibly planning horrible futures for you. And I remember when I was younger, I went to like the Brewster Library book sale. They have this giant book sale in their basement. And I would get like these books on world religions and trying to see like, what is Christianity meeting? What does it look like if it meets Hinduism or Buddhism, or what's the difference between all these religions? Like, I think there was always a part of me that was trying to be like, how is my religion supposed to be right and all these other ones not? Like, there's a bunch of people who are all claiming these things. And so I spent a lot of time reading and like learning about other religions and just like thinking about how does that affect my life? How can these things like all exist in the same place if I'm told one thing's right? I'm not religious as a person right now. I'm pretty agnostic. I believe that as a human, I'm not smart enough to understand if there is a God or if there are beings or things like that. Like, there could just be an alien, you know, and we could be a weird science experiment. And I am a tiny brained little being.
Yeah.
We'll never know. So a lot of what I write, I think, deals with people praying to unknown beings, or people looking into weird folk religions, or people exploring like lost religions of sorts, because like that's just fascinating to me, you know. Like I love when people do it in their writing, um and I don't really do it a lot of, how do I want to phrase this, I don't know if I'm always intentionally doing this, but it always comes in my stories. Like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm going to write this cosmic horror story, and then like, oh well, at the core, at the heart of this is some weird group of people worshiping this thing that like, ooh, you really shouldn't be worshiping. And I was like gonna be like, oh, this was supposed to be a love story, but instead it turned into this, and it always turns into this. So I mean, I read a lot of cosmic horror. Like I really love Laird Barron's work, Nathan Bollinger's
Same.
work, wonderful when he does cosmic stuff. Love John Langan's work, love
Oh,
Louis Lynn's work.
John.
Yeah, right. Um, and I love horror and dark fantasy and like weird fiction that's trying to get at this like unknowable thing. You know, I love when it's not clear. I love when there's cults involved. I love when uh, the horror isn't super defined. I often bounce off of some horror that is very like clear in what it's doing. Um, and I mean, I love a lot of it too. You know, like a werewolf story is a werewolf story. I love werewolf stories, and like you're like, that's a werewolf story. But I often love this whole like amorphous darkness that we can't comprehend, because I guess I really do believe we can't comprehend a lot of what's going on around us and whatnot. And like we have so much knowledge, and people have like learned so much stuff over the existence of humans, that you would think we'd have a better understanding of things in regards to like everything, which is really depressing. Um, but yeah. So does that answer the question? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
see, it's funny. As you were, as you were answering the question, I was thinking, your characters often, they don't understand what's
Yeah.
happening, but there's an acceptance. They're
Hmm.
just like, okay, this is kind of beyond my scope, but it is real, and it's just part of the fabric of my reality.
Yeah.
Um, we've been in enough places to know comes to mind, because again, I hate to keep going back to the basement, but it just is okay. This is something that I don't have any experience with, but it is here, and okay, and I'm here, and we're just going to have to coexist until maybe not, which is the best part of a short story. It's that ambiguity of like, oh, all right, I'm really not sure what's going to happen here. But all right, you're the cosmic influences are there, the folk horror influences are there. I'm curious to know, what was your experience with horror growing up? Were you like a monster kid? When did you kind of find that horror was an avenue for you?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, my favorite movie as like a 5-year-old or something, 5 to 7-year-old, was like Nightmare Before Christmas. So I really liked that. I really liked Tim Burton stuff as a kid.
Okay.
And then I got really into like Miyazaki's stuff. So like Spirited Away was like my next, like my 10 to like 13-year-old like favorite movie. So I know both of those aren't like horror per se, but they deal with
No.
like dark undertones, like magical, weird.
And fantastical, sure.
Yeah, so a lot of my background's that. Like when I was younger, I usually was reading like epic fantasy. I read like all the Magic the Gathering books. I read
Okay.
a lot of D&D books, Forgotten Realms. I was reading just like that kind of thing and loved it, and that was really what I was interested in. And when I was first writing in like middle school, I was writing like epic fantasy. And then I got made fun of a lot and I stopped writing. It's very um, so I think I loved horror movies growing up. Like my friend Mark and I and my buddy Cash, we used to watch like 28 Days Later a lot. I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 until I was 13, so I
Okay.
didn't have a lot of access to that kind of stuff. But every once in a while, I'd be over Mark's house and like get to sneak a little like
Sneak it
something.
in.
But as I got older, like horror was the thing I would watch a lot of, and again, I'd watch it with my buddies, and that would kind of be the thing. And like I feel like back in the day, there was like Spike TV, like the Men's Network, and they would have like TV versions of like Friday the 13th or like just slasher movies and stuff. So you'd see like the real toned down versions of those.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's it. So that was a part of it. But I think I've always just had like a weird dark outlook on things, and I couldn't really pinpoint why. One of my buddies tells the story because my buddy's dad was my soccer coach when I was like 6 or something, and he and I are still good friends. We like played Magic the other day together, and he always tells this story about how I was like 6 on this soccer team, and his dad was the coach, and he would be like, "All right, team, we're gonna go out. We're gonna have a lot of fun. It's gonna be great. We're gonna have an awesome time." And little Corey would be like, "Why should we even bother? We're just gonna lose. All the difficulty and hardness and stuff." And Ace, who's my buddy's dad, would be like, "All right, buddy, like you can think that, but we're gonna go have a good time." So I think there's always been some kind of like weird shadow in my in my soul, which is just odd because like I've had like a really nice life.
And the irony is, you're a librarian who basically spends your day, bringing people into this incredible world of literature and running these events and bringing happiness to a community.
Yeah, no, I always do my best to like try to help people and to like bring joy and to like encourage people and like help people. Like that's like the thing that I do. Like in addition to writing, I do some like writing mentorships. I do a lot of local writing groups where I'm trying to like help people publish and learn stuff, and that brings me a lot of joy. And I think that's how I deal with me having some kind of like dark outlook on things.
Dark outlook is great. Don't let go of it because it's producing some phenomenal literature.
Yeah. Yeah.
This collection, of course, we have to get to it. This collection illustrates the perilous nature between, man and nature, and what that looks like. I'm scared to ask. What is your outlook for the relationship between man and nature in the future? And I'm cautiously optimistic that it might not be as gloomy as I'm suspecting.
Yeah. Like I said, I've done a lot of library programming on this. I've read a lot of books. I've done a lot of like initiatives with like bigger library branches. So I've had a lot of very intelligent people tell me this and tell me that. So I'm pretty informed on a lot of it. I choose not to have an insanely bleak outlook. There are a lot of people doing a lot of good work. On Cape alone, we have tons and tons of nonprofits that are like, there's like the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition that is working on cleaning up all of the bays in Barnstable that are like essentially getting nutrients. They're getting too much nutrients in them that's killing like fish and stuff. It's killing the mollusks and whatnot. And that's coming from like lawn fertilizer because people suck and just like plant massive lawns and waste water and they're bad human beings. No offense if you have a sweet lawn.
No, I have a very small lawn that dies mostly.
Yeah, that's how it should be. But they do work with like trying to raise more mollusks to put in there, and the mollusks filter the water and that makes it cleaner. And so like that's a small thing. I've got my friends Marina and Dave, they run Cape Cod Edible Landscapes, and they are always trying to teach people about planting native plants and planting food forests and planting stuff for the bees and the birds and all these things that are alternatives to like the kind of toxic monoculture that is a lot of contemporary landscaping. That like the American dream is like you have the big lawn and you have all these.
It's got to be the greenest. Yeah,
and it's just not good, and it also costs people a ton of money. Like you could just like live a life that's like fairly cheaper on your landscaping needs and have stuff that's beneficial to everything around you, and you don't have to like throw tons of money, which like none of us have at these things. And there's like the Association to Preserve Cape Cod that's always doing education on this sort of thing and trying to raise money for this or that local like initiative and trying to educate people on the politics behind these things. And I've done programs with all of these people at the library, and like you hear what people are doing and you hear the number of people who show up to their stuff. And I see the amount of people in the crowds for these programs. And I'm like, hey, people care. There is a good number of people who are attuned, who are paying attention, who are like doing their best. And I don't have lots of faith in larger organizations, as I think a lot of us do these days.
Why? Yeah.
And I think that in communities, like in small communities where we like care about our neighbors, we care about our friends, where we want like the children of our near and dear, like people who are near and dear to us, we like want them to live in a good world. I think that as things move on, it's gonna become kind of clear in certain places that like things need to happen in order for people to get to still live happy and healthy lives, and we need to like curb the way we do certain things, you know? And I never want to be preachy because like everyone's life's hard, you know? Like a lot of people who aren't thinking about climate change, who aren't thinking about sustainability, they're like struggling to pay their bills. They have kids that like need to have they need to buy the equipment for the sports teams. They need the food for the lunches, and they need like the new winter jacket and all those things. And it's just like, it's hard to keep up with anything these days. And life is so overwhelming again and again and again. With what's going on and stuff, that like I can't. I think when I was younger, I probably was like, how dare people not like be up on stuff.
I was the same. I was.
But today, like I everyone's got a lot going on, and it's so hard for people to like make it, that if they can learn a little bit and do like small changes, like that's awesome, you know. Or if like you can at least be not doing the opposite and making things terrible. You're not just like in your backyard burning random plastic trash all the time. Like that's something. So I have a hopeful outlook in certain ways. Like I know things are gonna not be great. I conveniently live at like the highest point on Cape Cod, so like I am not going to be in the ocean. I will live on a little tiny island that is just my house by the end of things.
It'd be Coreylandia.
Yeah. I'll have like little writing retreats here. It'll be sweet. So yeah, I like to think that, because I don't think having the other outlook is productive. I don't think if we believe that this is the end, that there is no changing, that the human race has like dug itself into the hole that we can't see out of, I don't think there's any point of one telling those stories, you know? Like I have a couple of stories in here that are like pretty bleak.
Yeah.
But I try to leave a little bit of hope in there just because like that's what I want for humanity. I want people not to live in just like utter terror and just like be struggling.
I think that comes through in the collection. There definitely some hopeful stories there. No, for sure. Okay. Are there some of the worlds you created? Mm-hmm. Are there any plans to expand on that in novel length?
That's a good question.
So I also think that you have a werewolf novel in you, but I don't want to lead the witness.
I mean, that would be interesting to see what a Corey Farrenkopf werewolf novel would be, because I've never thought about writing a werewolf novel.
Oh, I would definitely buy it though.
I appreciate that. And I write a lot of stories with wolves in it. Like I have two or three other ones. One that isn't published yet that I think is like the best thing I've done, or one of the best things I've done. And what?
We can get this out there.
Yeah. I'm trying to. It's on submission to places. I'm throwing it at all the places. What would I expand? There is. So I've got a novel that deals with a lot of the stuff that is in that's in like Translations for a Dead Sea, that's in We Want Places to Know, that's in Waterlogged. It's in the same world. It deals with the same concepts. It has the same landscape. The creature thing that's going on is a little different. So that's one that I kind of messed around with. What else is in this one? Give me a moment.
Of course. I just think because of the worlds that you create within these stories, there's so much there. Mm-hmm. This is what makes a great short story. When you read it, it lands, you enjoyed it, but you're like, oh man, I would really love to live in that world longer. I love the fact that we don't usually get to, because short story's there for you, and this is what you get, and you get what you get. You don't get upset, but there are those occasions where someone will take something that they've created in a short story and expand on it, and I do love that as well. So, maybe
so much like a lot of most of my novels take place on Cape Cod. Most of them deal with very similar topics. So it's kind of like thematically expanded, I guess.
Okay.
Um, my next novel that my agent has right now is kind of like I had these 4 stories that came out in a shared anthology mini collection thing that's called Seasons of Severance that Cemetery Gates put out a while ago. And so I set these 4 stories on Monomoy Island, which is like the elbow of Cape Cod. It's this tiny spit of sand. And so I did 4 stories in that set on there. And I was like, man, I really like this. I'm going to try to do a novel set there. And I've been messing around with that. And that deals, again, with a lot of what's going on in this thing.
Very cool.
It's less, there is eco horror in it, but there's less of it. It's more of just like cosmic horror. Yeah, it's more like cosmic horror, like old timey folklore and belief systems and stuff. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Look, I hope I planted a seed for the werewolf novel.
I could try to write one.
Just me selfishly putting it out there. But yeah, I think the same thing with Nathan. God dang it, I can't remember the name of the short story, but it's so good. It's the first one in
Arv Acre.
There you. It's just so good. And again, I shouldn't get a novel from that. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't. The short story is perfect just as is, but I'm selfish and greedy. The theme of what's going on with the world these days.
Yeah.
Okay. I absolutely want to get in the fact that you're a librarian. Can't thank you enough for the work that you do. Can't give you enough respect for the work that you do. As a librarian, I want to give you a minute because of what is happening with book banning and with librarians specifically becoming targets for this administration. Take a minute. Is there anything that you want people to know? Because this is going to be on YouTube and people are going to watch it. Is there anything that you want people to know about librarians? State your piece.
Yeah, that's
I know it's heavy
for that question. Okay. Well, I think that there's a number of people throughout time, in recent years anyway, who are like, libraries, who uses those anymore? Like, what's the point? Like, we have the internet. And that's kind of a crazy outlook. Like, libraries are so much more than books.
Yeah.
Libraries
are bite through my knuckle when I hear that, but I do hear it as well.
Yeah. And libraries are basically like community centers these days. They are places where people can go where they don't have to spend money to be there. They're places that are trying to provide things to help educate people, to help make their lives easier, to provide entertainment, to like just give you a space to meet with other people. Like if you, as a non-library person, like if you want to run a book group, you can go to your library and be like, hey, I like reading this kind of stuff. I want to try to run this book group. I'll take care of all of it. Just like help me order the books. Like they'll probably give you space and probably give you time to do that.
Yeah.
If you are doing like some kind of outreach in your community and you're looking for a way to like spread the word about, do you do like a Meals for Neighbors program? Do you do like a clothing drive? Do you do like seed swaps if you're into gardening and stuff? Like your local library, if it's not already doing it, is generally always looking for stuff to do to help the community. And also like programming, like if I don't have to plan the program, like that's great. If you already have the connections to do it, that's wonderful. The other thing is like libraries, if you love them, if you support what they do, like be vocal about it, tell your friends about it, tell your relatives about it, like talk to your representatives, talk to whoever is in the like select board in your town. Whenever there's like stuff on the ballot about libraries, whenever there's stuff at town meetings about libraries, like go and show your support, like because in order to keep them going, they need funding. And just use them, like there's like I run, like I said, environmental programs, but I run book groups. I run video game tournaments for kids. I run like a Magic the Gathering, Pokemon card, Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons Day.
Everyone should follow Corey on Instagram, by the way, and your Instagram will be in the article show notes. You look like you're having so much fun. I get FOMO looking at your Instagram.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I try, and it's always been an important thing for me to try to do programming for younger people and to do programs for like people between the ages of like 20 and 40. A lot of library programs, I live on Cape Cod and there's a large percentage of retired population and they get a lot of programming and stuff. And I'm like, there's a lot of working class people here with kids. There's a lot of younger people who are like, man, Cape Cod is cold and gray in the winter. Every place shuts down. Like half our restaurants close. Like we're a seasonal economy. And like people need something to do that like gets you out of the grayness of winter. And that's one of the things.
Go to the library. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just use your libraries, like libraries also really run on statistics. So the more statistics we can show to our funding avenues, essentially, the more we can reason our existence, So like go check out some books, go to some programs, like go have fun. It's a place where you don't have to worry about spending money. Most libraries don't have fines anymore. Like we have Wi-Fi hotspots. Like if your Wi-Fi down, you don't have Wi-Fi, come borrow a Wi-Fi hotspot.
Love going to the library to do some work. Love it. Yeah. I just love the environment. Okay, now I'll champion libraries for a moment, even though no one asked me to, but I'm going to do it anyway.
It's all good.
The people that want to close libraries are typically the people that don't use libraries. I'll start there. I've never been to a library and spoken to a librarian who didn't, if I asked a question that they didn't have the answer to, no one ever looked at me and said, so I guess you're out of luck. It's always been a circumstance of, but let's figure this out. Let's see what, look at all these resources that we have, and have always walked away with the information that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Libraries, you nailed it. People have a specific libraries. Okay, it's a room full of books. They're not. They are community centers. There's every walk of life is in there. Every belief is in there, where everyone can gather and get together and have that sense of community that is sorely lacking. It is sorely lacking. So please get to your library. Please support your librarians. Please stand up for your librarians. That's important. And it's going to be, it's going to be a bit of a fight these next couple of years, but it's one that we're happy to take on. Mm-hmm. Last question I have for you, Corey. Mm-hmm. Let everybody know where they can buy your books and what events you have coming up, please.
Yeah. So you can get Haunted Ecologies anywhere. Yeah, you can get it at your local bookstores. You can get it at your libraries. You can get it on Amazon and Bookshop, and straight from the publisher at journalstone.com.
Great.
My favorite thing is if you go to your local indie place and request it. Like that's awesome because one, it's best to support local indie shops. Like I want as many small bookstores to exist as possible. Like on Cape, we have Sea Howl Books, which stocks my books, Brewster Bookshop that stocks my books, Titcomb's Books, Eight Cousins Books, and they've all been really supportive of me. They are the ones who sell the books at the different programs I do around Cape Cod. And they just like give me a ton of support. So I'd love for them to get the support back. But also whenever you go and request my book or request one of your other favorite authors' books at a bookshop, that bookshop now has them on their radar. They're like, oh, this author, like there's people in the community who want these books. So maybe I'll buy like 3 copies. Maybe I'll stick some on the shelf. Maybe it'll get like a shelf talker, or I'll read it and do some recommendations. And it's the same thing for libraries. Like if your library doesn't have my book or a book by another like indie horror author or dark fantasy author or sci-fi author or whatever you love, if you go there and you're like, hey, I really want this book and I am a patron of your library and you don't have it, like I would love to read it, more likely than not, like the library will buy it, you know? So
yeah, put it on their radar for sure.
But yeah, in theory, you should be able to get it anywhere. Like some Barnes and Nobles has it, some doesn't. But yeah, local indies are great. Buy it directly from there.
What about events coming up? Anything people can get to?
Yeah. On Tuesday, which I don't know if this is going to air before then.
No, but you know what? I can. I'll put it on my socials and I'll promote it for you.
Yeah. So I've got like my Cape Cod release party. That's at the Eastham Public Library. It's Tuesday, February 25th at 6:00. Sea Howl Books will be there selling stuff.
Nice.
Other things coming up. I mean, like I'm doing a bunch of conferences this summer. I'm doing. There's going to be a Halfway to Halloween program at the Hingham Noble on April. I'm looking at my calendar.
That's fun. I love Halfway to Halloween.
April 26th. So that's something that's happening. I'm doing. Oh, there's some other stuff I can't announce that I'm doing. Good thing I paused there. But I'll be at StokerCon this year. I do Librarians Day there. I do a lot of programming with other horror librarians. I do some like regular convention programming too. I'll be at ReaderCon. Hopefully I'll be doing some panels there. Yeah, that's a lot of it. I'm doing a couple other like little talks here and there. Like I was recently on what else did I do recently? I
And
was on
all of these things, all these
recently.
things are typically on your Instagram, right?
Yeah. So if you follow
Okay,
me on
great.
socials, like I'm always posting what I'm doing because otherwise people won't know.
Yes. We don't want Corey to be a mystery. We want
No.
people to find you.
Yes.
This has been fantastic, Corey. Again, Haunted Ecologies. People buy this book. 15 ecological horror stories. They are incredible. You're going to enjoy them. Are they going to scare you? Yes, that's what you're buying it for. But you're going to walk away with a deeper appreciation for nature and for the human condition. Oh, I know that's heavy, but we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Can't wait to talk again. Again, Sean O'Connor from Macabre Daily, Corey Farrenkopf, thank you so much for coming on. And until we speak again, take care.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sean.
You got it.